Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is pro-revenge story. Cast me Melissa =, co-parent Emma =, daughter. This story takes place a few years after our breakup and settlement of our house. We have had 2 years of 50/50ths custody of our daughter. 1 week on, 1 week off. Handover is Monday after school, which is good as I avoid seeing Melissa most weeks. On one of my weeks, Emma comes down with a stomach flu on Thursday, both ends like a volcano. This carried through to Saturday. Sunday, she was tired but no symptoms. I kept her home on Monday to ensure she is 48 hours symptom-free before sending her to school. I dropped Emma off at Melissa's, informing her she has had a stomach flu. She should be fine for school tomorrow, I explained, handing over Emma's backpack. Without asking any additional questions, she utters a sound I've only heard camels make before closing the door. Well, that was rude, I muttered to myself as I walked back to my car. But anyway, 3 days go by, I get a call from Melissa. Emma is lactose intolerant. You need to get special milk, she stated firmly. Huh, where is this coming from? I asked, genuinely confused. She had ice cream last night and threw up 45 minutes later. I spoke to my cosmetology instructor who said she must be lactose intolerant. Now it's time to mention my girlfriend at the time, wife now, is a qualified and practicing dietitian and is listening to this call as I put it on speaker. I really don't think so, my wife chimed in. Lactose intolerance mainly affects the bowels. Emma had gastro last week. The body will often reject dairy foods for 1-2 weeks post-gastro. If symptoms continue after 3 weeks, then it's something to look into. She went on to explain the body science behind this, but I'll spare you the details. My wife said that she cannot make formal diagnosis as that requires specific costly tests, but she can refer and treat such conditions. It's my professional opinion, she continued. As these symptoms are sudden and presented around the same time as gastro, it's gastro-related dairy avoidance. You're not a doctor, Melissa snapped. Emma is lactose intolerant, and if you don't comply with the treatment, I'll report you to Child Protection. I thought for a second, then said, okay, I'll make you a deal. You get the formal diagnosis, and I'll fund the full cost of the test. If it comes back negative, I'm not paying a cent. Hearing this, my wife smiled knowingly. So I pay for the test, and when I get the diagnosis, you will pay me back the full amount? Melissa clarified. Yup, including flights and accommodation. Melissa agreed to this deal. I texted her this for written evidence. She replied with okay. A few weeks go by, Emma tells me during our FaceTime call. Mommy is taking me to Chicago for tests. I get to go on a plane. Yay! That sounds exciting, sweetie, I responded, trying to match her enthusiasm while mentally shaking my head at the unnecessary expense. It's a good time to note, that week Emma was having milk with her breakfast, and surprise, surprise, no problems. Another 4 weeks go by. Melissa calls me. So the test results came back negative, she admitted reluctantly. The specialist said it was probably gastro-related issues. Nothing that we could have seen coming, but at least now we know. Anyway, the flights cost me $1,200, accommodation was $350, tests were $950, so you owe me half, which is $1,250. I nearly choked. Firstly, my wife who treats conditions like this said it was gastro-related. You refused to listen, stating we are not doctors, but apparently your cosmetology instructor is a qualified doctor, huh? She has medical training, Melissa started to defend. Secondly, I continued, cutting her off, $1,200, $350, $950 equals $2,500, half of which is $1,250, not $1,500, which brings me to my main point. We agreed that if the test was negative, I wasn't going to pay a cent. You agreed. That's not fair! I did this for Emma's health, she protested. No, you did this against professional advice and after threatening me with child services, I replied firmly. I hung up and sent her a screenshot of our agreement, including her okay response. She's not going to be happy about this, my wife commented as I showed her the text I'd sent. Not my problem, I shrugged. Maybe next time she'll listen to actual medical professionals. Edit. Is she an anti-vaxxer? No. She has no objections to me having Emma vaccinated. Is she a bad parent? No. We have different parenting styles, but Emma is safe with her. I do pay child support, for a while well above what is assessed, which is a different story altogether. I pay half of all extracurricular activities and school fees. I organize and pay for dental work, optometrist appointments, never asking for half the money back. To clarify, if the symptoms were that of lactose intolerance, I would have done the tests without hesitation. The facts are this. We had a lab confirmation of norovirus gastro. The GP advised, like they always do, to avoid dairy for 1, 2 weeks post-symptoms. She was aware of this. She self-diagnosed Emma with lactose intolerance, threatened me with child protection if I didn't adhere to a treatment regimen drafted by her for a condition that wasn't evident nor diagnosed. She chose to ignore an accredited and practicing dietitian's advice and listen to an unqualified cosmetology instructor's opinion. As my wife said, the current symptoms, timing, and current GP advice was to avoid dairy for a few weeks. A few weeks after symptoms cleared, Emma was having milk and cheese again with no issues. There was no reason to be worried that this was anything other than what the GP had told us. The next one is an entitled People Story. I never thought I'd be dealing with an HOA when I bought my 10-acre ranch property 15 years ago. Back then, it was all farmland and open space as far as you could see. My closest neighbor was half a mile away, and that's exactly how I liked it. I'd spent my whole career working in the city, and this ranch was supposed to be my peaceful retirement spot where I could raise a few head of cattle and tend to my vegetable garden without anyone bothering me. Things started changing about 3 years ago when developers bought up the land around me and started building one of those fancy planned communities. You know the type: identical beige houses with tiny yards, strict rules about what color you can paint your mailbox, and a homeowners association that thinks they run the whole world. The Willowbrook Estates development went up faster than weeds after rain, and suddenly I was surrounded by suburbanites who didn't appreciate the smell of cow manure or the sound of roosters at dawn. At first, the HOA left me alone. My property wasn't part of their development, so they had no authority over me. I figured we could coexist peacefully. They could have their manicured lawns and community pools, and I could have my ranch. Boy, was I wrong about that. The trouble started when they built their community center right up against my property line. The building was massive, easily the size of a small school, with meeting rooms, a fitness center, and administrative offices. The problem was they'd designed the whole thing without considering where they'd put their garbage. Their original plan called for dumpsters behind the community center, but apparently the residents complained about the smell and sight of trash containers visible from their precious walking trails. That's when the HOA board decided my property looked like the perfect solution to their problem. One morning, I woke up to find a massive commercial dumpster sitting about 20 feet inside my fence line. Not near the property line, actually on my land. I couldn't believe it. I marched over to the HOA office in their fancy community center and demanded they remove it immediately. The woman behind the desk, who turned out to be the HOA president, looked at me like I was some kind of crazy person. She explained very matter-of-factly that they'd conducted a survey of the area and determined that my property was being used as an unofficial landfill anyway, so one more dumpster wouldn't make any difference. When I asked what gave her that ridiculous impression, she pointed to a pile of old farming equipment I had stored behind my barn, stuff like rusted cultivators and an old harrow that I'd been meaning to either fix or scrap for years. I tried explaining that those were legitimate farming tools, not trash, but she cut me off. According to her, the HOA board had voted unanimously that my property constituted a public nuisance and health hazard due to its landfill-like conditions. Therefore, they had every right to use it for waste disposal. She even claimed they'd consulted with county officials who supposedly agreed with their assessment. I knew this was complete nonsense, but I also knew dealing with HOA boards was like arguing with brick walls. These people lived for petty power trips and manufactured drama. I decided to go home and research my options before making any rash moves. That's when I discovered something interesting. If the HOA was going to claim my property was operating as a landfill, then by state law it would need to be regulated as one. And if they were depositing waste on property they considered a landfill, they'd need permits and would be subject to all sorts of environmental regulations. I also learned that legitimate landfills charge tipping fees for waste disposal, fees that can be quite substantial for commercial customers. I spent the next week researching every regulation, statute, and ordinance I could find related to waste management and landfill operations. I contacted the state environmental agency and learned about permitting requirements. I spoke with several commercial waste management companies about pricing structures. Most importantly, I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in property rights and environmental law. Armed with all this information, I crafted a letter to the HOA board. In it, I thanked them for officially designating my property as a landfill and acknowledged their waste disposal needs. Since they'd determined that my land was already functioning as a landfill anyway, I was happy to formalize the arrangement. However, as a legitimate landfill operation, I'd need to charge appropriate tipping fees and ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. I enclosed a rate sheet I'd prepared based on commercial waste disposal fees in our area. For their dumpster service, I was implementing a monthly fee of $1,200, which covered not just the space rental, but also the administrative costs of maintaining proper landfill documentation and environmental compliance. I noted that this rate was actually quite reasonable compared to what they'd pay at commercial facilities, especially considering the convenience of having a landfill right next to their community center. The letter also outlined the new procedures they'd need to follow. All waste would need to be properly sorted and documented. Hazardous materials would require special handling and additional fees. I'd need advance notice of any large item disposals so I could ensure proper equipment was available. And of course, as the landfill operator, I'd need to conduct regular inspections of their waste to ensure compliance with environmental regulations. I delivered the letter personally and waited for their response. It came faster than I expected. Within 2 days, I received a furious phone call from the HOA president. She screamed that I couldn't charge them fees for something that was already there, that they weren't running a business, and that I was being completely unreasonable. I calmly explained that since they'd officially determined my property was a landfill and had begun depositing waste there, we now had a business relationship that needed to be properly documented and regulated. She insisted they wouldn't pay a penny and threatened to have the county force me to accept their trash for free since my property was allegedly already a nuisance. I wished her luck with that approach and suggested she might want to research landfill regulations before making any more demands. The next week was entertaining. I watched from my kitchen window as various HOA board members and county officials visited the community center for heated discussions. I could see a lot of pointing and gesturing in the direction of my property, but no one actually came to talk to me. Meanwhile, I'd been busy making some changes to accommodate my new role as a landfill operator. I installed a small trailer near the property line to serve as my administrative office and put up several official-looking signs about waste disposal regulations and safety procedures. I even bought some traffic cones and caution tape to mark off the active disposal area around their dumpster. The county inspector who eventually showed up was surprisingly helpful. When he saw the HOA's dumpster on my property and heard their claims about my land being a landfill, he explained that if this was indeed a landfill operation, it would need proper permits and regular inspections. He also noted that the farming equipment behind my barn clearly didn't constitute a landfill. Anyone with rural experience could see it was just old machinery waiting to be repaired or scrapped. More importantly, he confirmed that if the HOA wanted to continue using my property for waste disposal, they'd need to follow proper procedures and pay applicable fees. The alternative would be for them to remove their dumpster and find another solution for their trash. The HOA tried one more desperate move. They hired a lawyer who sent me a threatening letter claiming I was extorting them and demanding I accept their waste disposal for free. My lawyer responded with a detailed explanation of property rights and waste management law, along with documentation showing that their original claim about my property being a landfill was completely baseless. He also pointed out that by placing their dumpster on my property without permission, they were technically trespassing and illegally dumping. If they wanted to continue this arrangement, they needed to either pay the fees I'd outlined or face potential legal action for trespassing and illegal waste disposal. That letter apparently did the trick. Within a week, a crew showed up to remove the dumpster from my property. I watched from my porch as they loaded it onto a truck and hauled it away. The HOA president stood nearby supervising, shooting dirty looks in my direction the whole time. But the story doesn't end there. Having lost their convenient dumping ground, the HOA now had to find a legitimate solution for their community center's trash. They ended up paying significantly more to have dumpsters placed in their own parking lot, much to the dismay of residents who now had to look at and smell garbage containers right outside their precious community center. The whole situation cost them several $1,000s in legal fees, contractor costs for the dumpster relocation, and higher ongoing waste disposal fees. Meanwhile, I was back to enjoying my peaceful ranch with the added satisfaction of knowing I'd beaten them at their own game using their own ridiculous logic against them. The best part came a few months later when I overheard some residents complaining at the local feed store about their HOA fees going up to cover unexpected expenses. Apparently, the board had to levy a special assessment to pay for their failed landfill adventure. When you try to bully your neighbors and claim their property for your own use, sometimes it comes back to cost you more than you ever imagined. I still see the HOA president occasionally when I'm in town, and she always looks the other way when she spots me. I guess she learned that just because someone has a rural property doesn't mean they're stupid or pushover. Sometimes the best way to deal with unreasonable demands is to take them at face value and follow them to their logical conclusion, even when that conclusion exposes just how ridiculous they were in the first place. My ranch is still here, still peaceful, and still definitely not a landfill. The old farming equipment behind my barn eventually got hauled off to the scrapyard, not because anyone demanded it, but because I finally got around to cleaning up. And if any future HOA boards get ideas about using my property for their convenience, well, I've still got all those waste disposal regulations memorized. The next one is a petty revenge story. I'm GM of a largish family-owned company. I've been there for ages and loved my job until recently. The CEO until 6 months ago was the founder of the business and paterfamilias of the extended family. He passed away suddenly, and his granddaughter Karen has taken over. It started well, as she is clever, hardworking, and experienced. There was a lot of goodwill, as everyone was very loyal to the old man and wanted to help his granddaughter. But she is also a bully, a drunk, and a vocal misandrist. Our workforce is predominantly male. At a business drinks function, Karen got drunk, loudly denounced our most loyal and biggest 60% of revenue customer Bob as pale, stale, and male, and then loudly racially abused my wife when she tried to retrieve the situation. This wasn't by any stretch her first meltdown at customers, employees, or their wives. I met Bob the next week, apologized profusely, and asked if he'd ever thought of opening his own plant. He had. He and Mrs. Bob had dinner at our place, and we all made plans. In the coming weeks, myself, my leadership colleagues, and our machine operators have quietly signed up to work at the new plant. We've had after-hours meetings, which we codenamed Fight Club, to plan the new business. All very exciting. Here's the revenge bit. We are all on week-to-week employment contracts. Friday last week, we all resigned by email 5 minutes before clock-out time. Karen was sitting at her desk with email after email rolling in with resignation in the subject line. You could see the blood draining from her face. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered what she said to my wife. Tomorrow is our last day. We've recruited almost all the remaining employees to the new business. I have a non-compete clause in my contract, so it's a forced 3-month holiday for me. On Monday, the lights won't come on, and the motors won't turn at our old plant. It will just be in Karen and a pile of raw material with no one to process it. Her business has sufficient equity to recover, but it will be 6 months by the time she recruits a new team, recommissions the plant, and gets the order book full again. It will take her 24 months to get the business out of the red. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This was last year. In hindsight, I feel a little bad for the professor. He wasn't the worst I'd ever had, and he was up against a university which was in turmoil behind the scenes and spearheading an untested new course. That being said, I am paying quite exorbitantly for this education, and he was a right snot about this, so it was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project wherein we presented in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar taking place in a lecture hall, the last hour of which was reserved for 2 groups to go up and present at a half-hour apiece. This would involve a Q&A session afterwards, just to keep us on our toes, I suppose. Professor really emphasized that we pick the week and topic we're going to present in, and that's that. It's first come, first serve, and if you miss your spot, you get a 0. Thought nothing of it at the time, seemed fair. Didn't like his attitude, but whatever, right? Well, I won the lottery with the group I was assigned. They were grand lads and a dream to work with. We decided on an advantageous week to present, given our schedules. And we spent the run-up fine-tuning this presentation and really getting it to work. We used a stopwatch and everything. We even brought in outsiders to ask questions we might not predict. All was well, except we were presenting in week 5, and a disturbing pattern had emerged during the seminars in weeks 2, 3, and 4. For all his talk about keeping things constrained and everyone working within a schedule, whoever went second was screwed. The first group always ran long, and the second group had to make do with, at most, 20 minutes. You could see the stress on their faces, so come week 5, the rest of my group, a little bit more nervous than I am, worries aloud about whether all of our careful planning will be for pot. I decide to throw a Hail Mary, thinking that the worst I could get is a no, right? So I go up right before class starts and ask the prof, what are the odds we might go on first out of the 2, after all? We're sure we have this down to 30 minutes. The dude proceeds to rake me across the coals in front of everyone. It was a normal speaking voice, but the podium was right by the door and people were filing in. Tells me not to ask such a stupid question and to go back to my seat. I go back, tail between my legs, pissed off, and sit with steam shooting out of my ears for the next 2 hours. Sure enough, the other group goes first, and sure enough, they run long. We shoot concerned looks to the professor, who is too busy watching the other group to notice. Come 50 minutes in, and the first group is just about wrapping up. The guys in my group are silently freaking out about this. Nightmare, right? That's when the prof stands up, polite applause all around, and then says, well, I guess we're finishing early today, huh? Like a scene out of a courtroom drama, the 4 of us stand up like a shot and ask what the hell is going on. He can't quite hear us from back, and we're all talking at once, so he asks, what's going on? I charge down those steps like King Kong. In the same tone of voice, in front of the same door that people were now filing out of, I tell this guy that we're booked for the assignment today and we have something prepared. What? Turns out he totally plumb forgot that we were presenting today, and that's why he was so mad at my suggestion earlier. So I tell him we're presenting now to an empty room or he's giving us 100. The poor guy sure did try. Insisted we hadn't signed up this week. We had. Insisted that he could schedule us in next week, even assuming 2 of 4 of our group weren't away on placement for their teaching degree we booked for this week as ordered. Insisted that he had somewhere to be. Not my problem, mate. Dude just had to wear it. After making a phone call to, presumably, his next appointment, he had to stand there, white as a sheet, and wear it. I'll never forget the look on his face. So, we presented to a lecture hall empty of all but the professor and 2 students who, I guess, wanted to see more of the show. We got a great grade to boot. The next one is an entitled people story. His is at my most recent job, a retail store I won't name just yet. I've been there for somewhere from 10 months to a year or so, and there has been a slew of red flags, including but not limited to calling my cell phone angry and demanding to know where I was and why I wasn't at work when I was right there on the register, refusing to backtrack and add 15 minutes that I worked on to my time card or my next one and saying it was too late, illegal, refusing to respect my no when they call to ask if I can pick up a shift or stay late, and always attempting to undermine an "are you sure-y" me, giving me a warning about an absence where I was out because I had a 101 degrees fever, and they delivered this warning while I still had said fever and was still actively fighting the infection that I had been ignoring to come to work, telling me to be mindful of my terminal illness, ECT. The cherry on the top was when, after 4 conversations about making changes to my schedule and giving me more morning shifts and telling them exactly when my morning availability starts, they began scheduling me hours outside of my availability. First, just 1 shift, and when I said nothing because I thought it was a one-off, they scheduled me 3 more even further outside of my hours, just to test the waters and see how far they could push my boundaries. At one point, they scheduled me to close and then open, leaving less than 8 hours to shower, make dinner, and sleep in between. But the same manager is never closing and then opening. I did not feel it was worth a 5th conversation, nor can I continue to keep up with what is expected of me at this job with my current ailments, so I let management know I would be resigning. I told a manager who I really like and told her I was coming to her because the aforementioned manager, who is the GM, always attempts to undermine my boundaries when I draw them and would try to convince me to stay. She totally understood and even said she wouldn't let this manager know I was resigning until after I had gone home for the night so that I could avoid that talk with her. The manager in question, the GM, was informed, but did not inform the other managers. I received multiple calls from different people over the coming days after my last day, asking if I would be in for my shift. 2 nights ago, the GM calls me at dinner time and I miss the call. She texts me that she is checking in and wants to make sure I'm okay. I was skeptical and decided I would respond in the morning. I wake up to a text from another manager who was opening asking if I would be in for my shift. I inform her that I had already let her colleague know when my last day was, and it has passed. I then realize my GM did not give a rat's ass if I was okay, and was certainly calling to try and convince me to work that shift. She didn't inform her colleague that I wouldn't be in because she thought she had an opportunity to change my mind. I call the GM back later that day, and she does start out by asking if I am okay and saying she regrets that I'm going through this. She, after I was very clear about resigning, asks if I want the medical leave paperwork or if I am stepping away. I tell her that I'm stepping away to attend to my own health right now. She responds by telling me that she will check in occasionally and to just let her know when I'm ready to come back. I thought my head was gonna blow. I know that she knows what she's doing and it wasn't worth hashing out on the phone and getting my blood pressure up, so I simply said, okay, knowing that she will never receive that call from me. The absolute nerve. The next one is an entitled parent story. For context, I'm 22M, the oldest son of our mother with 2 brothers, 18-13. We each have different fathers, and though I mostly lived with my paternal grandparents growing up, my brothers both lived with her. The story I'm going to tell will be about the 18-year-old, who I'll call Jay for simplicity. Now, our relationship with our mother has been strenuous at times, and it's become ever increasingly clear she's far from a saint. When she was with Jay's father, my aforementioned grandparents took note of the fact that I vehemently refused to go back to her house after visiting them. They told me they had to physically pry me away in order to get me to go, which they had to do legally. I lived with her then. One day I went to visit them and they noticed I had suspicious bruises on my body. Both my mother and Jay's father claimed it was from me playing rough with a dog. When they took me to a doctor to check it out, the doctor told them they could have only been caused by physical abuse, which is what led me to living with my grandparents. I didn't remember any of this, but had it explained to me much later when I was in high school, and made a lot of sense since when I was younger, I would frequently flinch whenever people, such as my father, raised their hands for any reason. Now it had been years since that happened, so I didn't hold any ill will towards her for it, figuring she was just as much a victim of it, until one day she brought it up and revealed she still truly believed it was the dog. There was also her battle with alcoholism. I don't want to get too into it, given it's something she's gotten fixed, and I think it would be untactful to make fun of what was clearly a low point in her life. That said, I think it's important to note because it caused her to get into a lot of fights with our stepdad at the time, the father of the 13-year-old, because I didn't live there, I only saw bits and pieces, but as you can imagine, my brothers had to live with it. With all of that said, the story this post is supposed to be about happened April, the week of the eclipse. I was visiting for the week, and my mother had Jay take her car to come pick me up. Things were going fine for the first day or so, then it happened. Jay and his girlfriend were both at work while our mom was asleep. She worked the night shift. So I was in the living room watching YouTube or something. She came out of her room where she told me she was mad at Jay before she went back to sleep. Apparently, he was supposed to refill the gas after he picked me up, and he forgot to. I didn't think much of it at the time. He made a mistake, she'd probably call him out on it, and that would be that. Later, when Jay got back home, we went out to his girlfriend's place to watch the eclipse. Then, suddenly, I got a call from my mother asking to talk to Jay. I handed the phone over. I could hear my mother screaming from across the driveway while Jay, with the patience of a saint, tried to explain that he had made a mistake and apologized. And as if flying off the handle at him wasn't bad enough, she told him she was going to take his car away, which, he needed to get to work. Mind you, she had given him the car not long before, but even so, that's still a majorly dick move, and illegal, I'm certain. And also, she was mad because she had to visit the gas station before work, but as far as I know, she wasn't even late to work, she was just in a rush. She made it on time. And yet she was insistent that he had somehow ducked him over. Jay, in a voice that made it clear this was far from the first time something like this had happened, told her in no uncertain terms that he was done dealing with her and was leaving. And indeed, when we got back, he immediately started packing up his things to go and live with his girlfriend, where he still lives today. While that was happening, she said that she wanted to go talk to Jay in private. I was foolishly hoping this would be her admitting to going too far and apologizing. And though I wasn't privy to the conversation, she at least had the tact to not start yelling at him again. I feel confident that that wasn't the case. Once all was said and done and Jay was out of the house, she walked into the living room on the phone with Jay's girlfriend, evidently trying to get her to let her talk to him, but she wasn't letting her. At which point she started hurling insults at the poor girl, calling her a whore who was stealing him away from her. This grown-ass 40-year-old woman was yelling at a girl half her age because she wouldn't let her boyfriend's abusive mom speak to him. So, fast forward to today. From how I understand, Jay still refuses to speak to her, and good for him because he's braver than me. Unfortunately, I'm too afraid of conflict to be able to take a firm stance against her. I even went with her to Thanksgiving the other week just for the sake of not rocking the boat. That said, I have distanced her otherwise. I haven't visited her other than for Thanksgiving, and I've made it a point to not speak to her unless she contacts me first. Still, I know that I'm being too easy on her for what she did. I'm hoping the next time something like this happens, 'cause I just know it will, I'll have the balls to cut her off properly. But yeah, that's all I have to say. The next one is an entitled People story. This was a weird situation and conversation, but fortunately my mother handled it quite well. Before I go into what happened, let me set the scene of what led up to this. Not add confusion, I am 24M and my mom is 54F. Priest-a-mom is around 5660M, stepdad 4246M. My mother is a devout Muslim woman, but lately, however, she's been a bit more relaxed, rather being a total psycho since it's led to many family members having difficulties having conversations with her, me included. During the past 2 years, I underwent a pretty harsh treatment plan after catching a serious infection. This led to the discovery of me being infertile. Important. It was discovered that even prior to the infection, my cells were not functioning at all, and even if they did impregnate, it would lead to severe problems to the woman and the fetus, so no children for me. My mom and her Mosque prior to the infection has been pressuring me into finding a partner, aka arranged marriage. Now, to the even in question. A couple of weeks ago, my mom attended her usual studies. She let it slip to some of her friends about my infertility and how she has made peace with it since almost losing her son to the infection. Since, as usual, the girls kept pressuring her and me asking why am I not with anyone and why am I so against marriage. Then they just suddenly got quiet regarding the infertility, and my mom said it was dead silent. Days leading up to the confrontation, my mom received several messages from her ladies expressing how she is brave for accepting her son's infertility, or saying that I won't visit the mosque as much anymore, and other really strange messages. One message in particular said how my mom must feel not being able to talk to her son anymore, finding out my infertility. That pissed off my mom. A few days ago, my mom was just finishing her lessons again, and the priest imam came up to her. It started with the usual small talk like, hello, and how are you, and how is the children? You know, the usual talk before something serious. The convo went a little like this: priest, do you still talk to your son, the oldest one? Mom, yes, of course I do. He's my son. He lives abroad fine, but we make it works with the time difference. Priest, I see your son. Many of the members mentioned of his infertility? How'd that come about, Mom? Well, the doctors said even before the infection it was already like that. Why the sudden concern? Priest, it's not a concern for him, but more for you, seeing you're accepting to this. It's not what a proper mother should react to Mom. Are you saying I'm a bad mother? It's not my fault or my son's fault for being infertile. That's just life, priest. I know, and God works mysterious ways, sure. But in Islam, you know, it's not considered eligible to be Muslim anymore if you're infertile. God loves children, and children bearing is a must, and your son can't do that. Mom, what are you trying to say? Priest, I say this with the utmost respect, but I think it's best you cut contact with your son. It's not good for Muslim to be friend with non-Muslim. It's not respectful, and many of the other members share the same thought. Mom, are you saying because my son is infertile I should just throw him away like trash? It's not my fault. I had him at a young age, and he's been with me through some tough times, and just because of some flaws he has, you want me to cut contact just like that? What the duck is wrong with you? Priest, it's just the way things are, and if you don't agree, then don't bother showing your face here again. I will also tell your husband about this. If it was legal, punishment would be done accordingly. My mom went on a tirade about how this is not Islam and she has been devout for many years, and because of one situation, I should have been thrown away like nothing. Just to let you all know, the priest in question has never been someone I fully trusted. His views are either flawed or completely made up. He believes in practice of harsh discipline, or if a child cries, it means the child is possessed by a demon. My mom told this to my stepdad, and he wasn't happy to say the least. And even more so when the imam threatened bodily harm on my mother. IDK what came of it, but he said to her that the imam is taking a leave of absence for a while. The other members have yet to make any comments, but one member said she was also infertile and she just adopted her husband's kids as the husband's first wife died of a similar infection I had. And much like me, the imam shunned him for having a dead wife. I hardly doubt there is an update, but if something happens, I will let you know anyway. Thank you for watching.